Can playing violent video games really rot your brain? This question is based on a Daily Mail article that claims first-person shooter games can rot the brain. We're going to analyze the study used to make these claims, explain general weaknesses and results of the study, and go through some of the claims the Daily Mail article made and determine their validity. So the media source. The Daily Claim put out an article that said violent video games can rot the brain. To back this, they used a study conducted at the University of Montreal on the differences between first-person shooter games and non-violent games. They explained that violent video game players showed a loss of gray matter in the hippocampus, while non-violent video game players showed an increase in the hippocampus. They also said that non-violent video game players could see an increase in mental processing. Now, this study's purpose was to measure the effects of action video games such as Call of Duty and Medal of Honor, and 3D platform games such as Super Mario on what they called response strategies and spatial strategies. These strategies are learning strategies that the players use to navigate through a game. Response strategies are reliant on memorizing the area, and spatial strategies are more reliant on landmarks. So in another study conducted by the lead author, they wanted to test the effect of playing the 3D platform game Super Mario on cognitive processing on aging communities, and their results showed that these groups had increased gray matter and helped improve the ocular motor inhibition, which is eye coordination. So in this study, they use virtual maze to determine response strategies and spatial strategies of each player. Each player also had to do 90 hours of gameplay, and to monitor their progress, they used MRI scans. Finally, they hypothesized that action video game players would have a decrease in gray matter, and non-violent game players would show an increase in gray matter. Now, there are some weaknesses of this study. The number one being, it's the first of its kind. It has not been proven or disproven. It also has a small sample size relative to the claims that they are making. And while doing research, I found that it was hard to find more studies that focused on structural differences, but rather they all focused on behavioral differences of gameplay. For example, Johannes Brewer and other authors used a more representative sample. They used 276 German gamers, aged 14 to 21, to find out if violent video games predicts aggressive behavior or if physical aggression points to playing video games. Their results were odd, and they were shocked by them. So, they wielded that in the group of 14 to 17, the results supported the selection hypothesis that said physical aggression predicts subsequent use of violent video games, and the other age group had no evidence for either hypothesis. In another study done by Patrick Markey and others, they aimed to find evidence between popular beliefs that violent video games have a direct correlation to violent crimes. Their graph results showed a decrease in video game sales and an increase in homicides and aggravated assaults, going against the popular myth that violent video games can cause people to conduct other horrible crimes like mass shootings. Now, the first claim the Daily Mail made was that playing first shooter games can increase a gamer's risk for Alzheimer's. Now, the reality is that the research only points to the fact that people with Alzheimer's have lower levels of gray matter in the same way that their results showed. Now, the authors do say that more studies would have to be conducted to determine whether this is accurate. The second claim is that the Daily Mail oversimplifies the findings by saying that violent video games cause there to be fewer neurons. However, there's a slight difference in saying neurons and gray matter, because gray matter is made up of cell bodies and some glial cells. So it is an oversimplification of the findings. Now, the third claim and the final claim is that they imply the researchers were trying to challenge previous findings. The reality is that the researchers were trying to focus on learning strategies that each of these gamers use and how that affects the hippocampus, because some learning strategies are more dependent on the caudate nucleus rather than the hippocampus. Now, to wrap this all up, I did some research on a meta-analytic study conducted by Pilar Toriel that they gathered data from 20 experimental studies on video games and their effect on older adults. Now, they used 6 main variables: And those were the type of game, duration of the training, number of games used, the type of training and control groups, and their ages. And their results showed that training older adults with such games did help improve certain aspects of cognitive ability. However, all of this is dependent on more research. These are my references that I use, and thank you.